Okay, let's talk terminology. It is really important to know terminology. Knowing definitions, equations, and units are critical for us to be able to talk to each other when we're trying to understand endurance performance, how to improve it. So you've already taken KIN 346 and you would have gone through a large list of terms, and those are important to know, and you're going to need to know them. We'll go through some additional terms. We'll go through some of those terms on your terminology list from 346 in a little bit more detail. But let's go through some definitions in general here. So first off, it's important to know you're in the Department of Kinesiology, and that is the scientific study of human movement. Just good to know. Biomechanics is a science which investigates motion and action of forces, internal and external, including statics, dynamics, kinematics, kinetics that occur during the actions performed by a living organism, for example, a human being. I always like to shorten this and just say biomechanics is the physics of sport. Yeah, it's probably close enough to a correct definition. Endurance, this is biomechanics of endurance performance, so it's important to define that term. Endurance is the ability to sustain a prolonged stressful effort or activity. That just comes from the dictionary. Or the ability to continue despite pain, fatigue, or stress. Right, so that's endurance. Still a little bit nebulous, but at least that gives us a working definition to go off of. So biomechanics of endurance performance, let's define what performance is. The execution of an action, something that is accomplished, how well we do something, how well we run a 5K, how fast we run a 5K, how fast we run a marathon, how fast we swim 1,000 meters. Sometimes it's just completing, and but still, performance is simply a measure of how well we do something. All right, now you have a terminology worksheet up in Canvas. Make sure you download that and go through it. If you took KIN 346 with me, we've gone through almost all those terms. There's some that we did not get to in any particular semester, but for the most part, we went through a large portion of them. In this class, terms that we'll go over will, in more detail, will be terms like drag force, buoyancy force, power. We'll talk more specifically about ground reaction forces. We'll talk about the process of doing a kinetic analysis and really applying Newton's laws of motion. So those, I'll just ask you to sort of zero in on these. You're going to need to know those, but make sure you go through that terminology worksheet and in week 1 of the semester and really fill it out. Identify equations where appropriate, identify units where appropriate, and have these just in your back pocket ready to go. All right. Endurance events that we're going to be talking about will include events like the marathon, so 26.2 miles of running. And elite runners will do that in about 2 hours. Men low 2 hours, maybe 2:02. Women 2:15. Now we did see Eliud Kipchoge go under 2 hours in the sub-2 project, but that involved a lot of special conditions that really sort of helped tip the scales for him to get under 2 hours, which was really really amazing. Doesn't count as a world record because he had pacers. The course was flat. And he was the only actual competitor doing it at the time. Mere mortals, however, will do a marathon in anywhere from 3 to 6 hours. If you get under 3 hours, that's fantastic. But usually an average time for a marathon like New York or Boston, or even here in Las Vegas, the Rock and Roll Marathon, usually the average marathon will be right around the 3 or 4 hour mark. Another endurance event that we'll spend a lot of time talking about is Ironman. Now, Ironman is a brand. There's other brands of iron distance events. Challenge is a main competitor. Outlaw in the UK. Silverman used to be here in town. Vineman was a race, an independent race at one point over in California. But generically, we often call these events Ironman events, but it's more correct to say iron distance. In this event, you swim 2.4 miles, bike 112 miles, and run 26.2 miles, all on the same day. The elite athletes will be around 8.5 hours. Mere mortals, 11 to 16 hours. And I mentioned another video that most iron distance events will have a cutoff time of 17 hours. Some do drop the cutoff to 15 hours, depending on the course, and some are longer. I'm thinking of a race like Norsemen. I don't even think they have a cutoff time. So it's an extreme race that is quite different of an experience. I'll talk about that race. But doing this event for all day, and that's pretty amazing to be able to exercise for that continuous period of time. All right, so throughout the course, it will be important to use terminology correctly. That is something that in conversations, we want to make sure that we're doing that. So rote memorization of terms is really critical. Understanding the terms comes in this class, and really, I believe that understanding will come as we start applying terms like drag force, like buoyancy force to endurance performance. What I encourage you to do is, as you read a book, any book, or paper that you're looking for a citation, what I encourage you to do is, as you read these in real time, have a piece of paper next to you or a Word document open, and start writing down key terms that you come across. And I will strongly believe that as you start doing that, even writing down terms that you already know, you'll start to learn these terms even better, because you'll be able to pick them out, you'll be able to define them quickly, you'll be able to define quickly what work is, what kinetic energy is, what potential energy is, what a force is, and what have you. So as you identify these terms, make sure that you can define them, and you can look them up right then or look them up later on. Provide an equation for each term when it's appropriate. Not all parameters have an equation, and state the units. Again, not all parameters have units when appropriate. Now, when I did my doctoral work, this is exactly how I went about my reading. Is I kept a journal, and as I was reading different pieces of work, I would write down key terms. And the more that I did that, the more I recognized common key terms, and then ultimately wrote them down as a key terminology list. And I needed to make sure that I understood those terms in order to talk with other biomechanists and other people interested in exercise science. So I'm going to encourage you to do the same. To write down terms and then be able to define them. Use the terminology worksheet as sort of a launching pad, but expand on it, because that is not an exhaustive list of biomechanic terms. Okay, thanks everybody.